Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Concept Pending. This is Greg Holken. This is the Heroes and Villains podcast where we talk about everything you maybe or maybe didn't want to know about what goes into our product, what goes into, being a fan of these things. And today we've got Austin, who heads up a lot of our event coordination out in the field. Hi, Austin.
Thank you guys for having me. Great to be here.
Happy to have you, man.
Happy to have you here. Yeah, like Greg said, we've worked with Austin for a long time. Past couple years, he's been helping us with all of our trade shows, and he's become like a crucial part of our team. Austin, you want to give a little quick intro?
Yeah, hi, I'm Austin. I work with HV for most of the event planning and booths. I get to interact with a lot of you guys out in the actual customers, and you guys, your input on our brand just in general is amazing, and I love the engagement that you guys give us. But yeah, I would say the most recognizable or the piece that you guys could see me in, or the most recent post, is the year in review. I'm the guy at the beginning who's standing on the X-Men table at the New York Comic-Con booth and shouting with a crowd of people around me. So that's me. I'm not usually that loud, and it was a really funny situation that got us there. But that's a little bit about me. I'm super into Dungeons and Dragons and some other brands or some other labels that HV does as well.
Yeah, I think the New York Comic-Con show was hilarious with you just screaming on top of that podium in front of thousands of people was just so funny to me because we never see you with that loud of an octave. So it was very out of character.
It was tough too. I had to pop a lozenge and drink a hot tea after every single time, and my voice would be rejuvenated for the next day for me to do that same thing over again. And we tried our best to do that as well as possible. And the trivia questions were really fun as well. And that actually leads me to my favorite moment at a show, which was we had a younger girl, a 5-year-old girl that was super interested in Mystique, or super interested in HV as a brand and X-Men overall. And I was able to ask her what Mystique's real name was. And she gave it to me, and we gave her a HV shirt. And she was like, this has made my convention. Her mom and her was like, this made our New York Comic-Con, which was so awesome to hear. And they ended up, just actually repping the shirt the next day and coming to the booth, which was great to see as well.
That's always one of my favorite things. I remember that experience specifically, and it was great because we got photos of her afterwards, but I always love the people who are just so stoked about the product that they either just wear it as soon as they buy it or they wear it the next day. We've had some people actually just wear it all weekend, and I love seeing it.
Yeah. And sometimes we'll see people wearing the previous year's merch as well. I saw a couple people with the Owlbear shirt at New York Comic-Con, which was our exclusive the year before. And it's just amazing to see those those things. And we usually post pictures to our Instagram when we see them as well.
I've not been to any of the conventions for HV, which would be wonderful if I could remedy that someday, but what are you going to do?
We're getting there, Greg.
Yep, that's fair. It sounds like what you've described so far, Austin, sounds almost like a carnival barker, but I assume that's not what you normally do. You're not up there in a straw boater with a cane tapping at a sign.
Yeah, it's only one role.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's all. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, most of the time I'm at the register or I'm on the floor, talking to people about the products, saying, trying to give an insight to some of the inspiration that, some of the pieces are, or even why we chose to go with X-Men at New York Comic-Con, those things, right? I think we want to portray ourselves well enough, but at the same time, we want to also have a good understanding of where our fans are and what they're looking for, which I think we've been able to hit at every single con consistently, at least from the feedback that we've gotten at the con, right? So I'm mostly interacting with the customers coming by our booth and seeing everybody. And then the feedback that I usually get, though, is amazing. And assisting with, letting people know our exclusives for the day, because we've started doing that more often. The X-Men shirts that we had every single different day were super big. Like those, we had some that sold out before like lunchtime, and it's tough, but it's also just great to see that engagement. And then that let a lot of people know that if they wanted a favorite X-Men, because we started with Cyclops, which isn't too big of a deal to some people. Some people really like them, but then the next day was Magneto, I want to say, or Rogue. And so everybody was like, I'm gonna get here first thing tomorrow to get Rogue because she's my girl, or Magneto because he's sick.
It'd be kind of cool if you had like a board or something where you do like a big reveal of what tomorrow's item is going to be so people can see it all day long. And
yeah, we talked about that, and then we want to do an Instagram post as well of that, of the exclusive, so we can show it every single day. I think that would be great engagement, and that would help drive everything also.
So like we've definitely got things planned for New York Comic Con this year. Still top secret, can't talk about it.
Sure.
But I think you and everybody else they're all going to be like very happy with it.
Yeah, no, I think everybody's real feedback from the last one was that they didn't even know it was HV. Like we had so much of like silent marketing just from it being like an Xavier classroom that it really coincided and echoed the brand so much that at the end, like at the checkout, they were like, "Oh, this is Heroes and Villains. You guys rock!" But
no, we got so much of that weekend.
Yeah, and that's what really drove everybody to us, because it really encapsulated an experience rather than just, hey, we're selling merch. It's like, dang, like you were transported into the halls of the X-Men, or the Xavier Institute, which was really sick and a unique understanding and a unique experience.
I think for me, obviously Austin has a lot more experience with events, but I think for me that is really all it's about, is just creating that interaction and engagement where they feel like seen when they come in and they think like, oh my God, like I would have never thought that someone would have done this, and I love it.
Well, nobody wants to feel like they're just, number on a spreadsheet or one of those like handheld clicker things that people use at a gate, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's definitely what separates our team apart at the shows, is we always go that extra mile to make sure we're having those conversations with the fans, which I mean is honestly how we've built a lot of our best friendships through some of these events, is just random people that we've met at the shows just talking about stuff.
And then seeing those people year after year too has been great. Like they come by the booth wearing last year's stuff, like I said earlier, or they'll have other things, or they'll be like, all right, there's one person that's literally every single year is like, I want one of everything. And we're like, everything? And they're like, everything. And that's, they're like, we want to support you guys. We want to keep seeing you out here. So keep coming, Your
wish is granted. Yeah.
So I guess since you already knew about us before we had the pleasure of meeting you, Austin, is there any like HV products that really resonate with you, or that you like drawed you into the brand, I guess?
Yeah, I would say, the first launch of Dungeons and Dragons really, really set it off. The Roll to Hit, line, as well as, and then my favorite piece is actually the D&D Bomber, which I know the people at home can't see me right now, but I'm actually in. It's got a felt dragon on the back of it. It's got a lot of just the attention to detail of the brand. It really stood out to me, like the dice going up the sleeves, the dice pattern in the back of the jacket, or the inside of the jacket, as well as the felt dragon on the back. But to talk a little bit more about HV, like my dad is a diehard Star Wars fan. He loves Star Trek as well. Like he's like, the ultimate old school nerd. Every single time I go and work a show now, he's like, hey, so like, what you bringing me back? Or hey, what do they got? And so, I was able to at New York Comic Con take him a hat back, and then he wanted the Wolverine shirt as well. He's like, this year for Christmas, all he wanted HV products, which was, so fun, but also it makes it a little difficult where it's like, okay, you want one of everything that we have, or you want, 4 of these things. And it's just awesome though. And then he really enjoys like the attention to detail as well, as the quality of the product. Like every time I see him, and he's got the Jedi bomber jacket that was featured at San Diego Comic-Con, I want to say last year, or the year before last, sorry. And he So for this year for Christmas, I had to get him the hat to go to match with it, right? So, but now every time I see him, he's not always in the bomber, but he's always in the hat.
I think we're gonna need a like a family Christmas photo of everybody fully
completely decked out.
Yeah, fully HV'd out. Like we're gonna need that as our Christmas promotion for this year. Absolutely.
That's sick. I could definitely make that happen too.
And I won't lie, I am an old man. I am, and so
you're not that old. Calm
Oh
down.
yeah, okay, that's fair. I've grown up with Star Wars and everything, but as much as I like Star Wars, Star Trek is like a little bit closer to my heart. So hearing you name check Star Trek earlier just like it made me happy for just a second because like it doesn't get nearly as much attention. I'm always happy to hear someone talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's been touched on yet or not, but Greg is the biggest Trekkie in the company, if not the world. So.
Oh, I don't speak Klingon, so I'm not the biggest Trekkie in the world. I mean, kapla! But that's about it.
But back to your question, the Dungeons and Dragons piece really coincides with me because I've been a dungeon master for the last 10 years now, and I've been D&D has been like a critical part of my life of like making friends in my childhood to continuing a campaign into my teenage and adulthood, and it's really been a critical part of everything. So to see the brand done so well and the pieces like actually correctly displayed, like the motifs, the owlbear, like those things is what really drew me into HV to begin with, I would say.
When you started, was D&D the first game you played?
Yeah, so I have a fun backstory around that. So second edition was my first one. I was at a board game shop. I was about 11 years old, maybe 10 at the time, and the guy was like, "All right, roll up a character." And I'm a big anime fan at the same time, so I thought of this edgy character that's gonna drop from the moon, and he's gonna do all this crazy stuff, and he's gonna be this ultimate weapon. And so I told the DM that, and he's like, "Yeah, sure, you could do that." I'm like, "Okay." And so like my dude lands, he comes down, like he paints this great picture of him, and he was like half demon, half this, half that, like all these ideas that a kid would have. And the DM, like after I land in this huge crater with this giant battle axe and all this other stuff, he's like, "All right, roll damage." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, you just fell from the moon. You got to roll damage for that." And I'm like, "What?" And it really, so that guy died, because you can't just drop from the moon and go through the atmosphere and all these other things without living. So it really taught me that D&D isn't always about the main story. You're not always the main character. You're not always going to save the world. Sometimes you're going to ruin it. Sometimes you might, you might forsake the world instead of saving it. But yeah, so that's how it really started with me in that second edition. And I learned that, it's okay not to be that person at the end of the day, that main character. Sometimes you have to play a supporting role. Sometimes you transition into that main character role.
So like which edition's your favorite? Like if you were to which one would you play if you just had your druthers?
5e. 5e just does it the most, I would say, consistently right now. Whereas everybody, like, it doesn't take days to memorize your character. You have the pre-written flaws. You have the pre-written. There's a lot of information for it out there, and everything is accessible, which means that it's, and then it just doesn't take a lot of prep work, and the players don't have to read a 500-page book to make it, make sense.
Also, I'm going to be perfectly honest here. I feel like FACO is a punishment. It was deliberately developed just to punish people for getting into D&D, which is like a very strange way to go about designing your game. But
100%. Whereas 5e, everybody sort of gets to be overpowered. I feel like all the players get to do cool stuff at certain levels. You can still make stupid mistakes. Like I was in a one-shot at a convention during some downtime, and it had my friend was a sorcerer, and sorcerers start with a d6 hit points, and he walked into a cave. He had and the DM made him roll his HP, which instead of giving him one, because that's what he does. That's what the DM's motive was. And my friend was just really pestering. Like, you wanted to know exactly the detail of the rocks, what kind of stalactites. Like, you would think he was a geologist, at the end of the day. And so the cave was slippery at the bottom, and the DM made him roll a dex check, and he died just right there on the spot because he failed it and slipped and died.
Yep.
And, that writes your character out.
It can be brutal, right?
Yeah.
Like, I as a dungeon master have killed characters in the first session more than once.
Yeah, I had a game like that where the Curse of Strahd. This is probably my favorite pre-written dungeon master game to run, and I had that where a player was chasing. So I used a couple hooks. I used the people that comes out to sort of talk to the players and loop them into to hook back into, and then I used them hunting for werewolves tracks in the Shrouded Forest or right outside of Barovia, and the players were hunting these werewolves outside of Barovia, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, and one was a ranger, and he was like, I can't be impeded by magical anything. Like, you know, my class features are this, and that, so I'm gonna find the werewolves. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, I rolled a nat 20. Where are they at? And I'm like, all right, you're about like 100 feet from them. And this is a whole level 1 like group, like 6 people. And they're like, okay, yeah. Like, I was like, all right, you see about 11 werewolves. And they're like, okay, 11? I'm going to run up and shoot one. And I'm like, okay, roll a hit. And he hits the werewolf. And I'm like, all right, I need you guys to roll initiative. And by the end of it, they're all dead. And and that was a TPK, and I stopped for a second because I had it written in there, like if they were to die, like what would happen. And they all woke up in Barovia. But, you know, it could be one way or the other where, you know, depending on how it goes, like that could be it. So after this chain of events sort of transpired, everybody went around the table like looking at each other just with a defeated look on their face and bewilderment, which is just, it's so hard to encapsulate, like if you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons and if you haven't, you know, pre-written your story and stuff like that. But yeah.
And I don't know how to explain to a lot of people the sheer amount of joy you can feel as a dungeon master. It's not exactly that you break someone's spirit, it's more like you just bruise it real hard. You don't want to break someone to the point where they don't want to play anymore, right? It's kind of like a con job, right? Where what you want is you want to draw as much out of them as you can. You want to keep them playing, so you don't want to just overwhelm them with misery, but at the same time.
Misery can be fun.
Oh my gosh. And Barovia, the setting we've been talking about it's like Transylvania, right? It's like spooky, misty, like you got monsters and vampires. Like the name of the adventure that Austin mentioned, the Curse of Strahd, refers to Strahd von Zarevich, who is a vampire lord over this area. And he's the person you're dealing with. And he is just the worst and an absolute delight as a dungeon master.
100%. Like he is going to make your life hell. He is like the Dungeons and Dragons, like Dracula at the end of the day. Like he is, and then he's got this whole entire sort of mist that he controls, that he can lift, and so once your players get in, he can make it so that if they run into the mist, they get levels of exhaustion and they get spit back out in Barovia. So there's no way to get out once like they sort of get looped in. So it leaves less up to chance, at least in some games. Whereas, you know, some games, if you give your players an option to do whatever, they will do whatever. Like almost every single time as a dungeon master, like I'll have a pre-written thing for all these NPCs, and the one that I don't, my players will sense, and they will be like, yeah, this farmer whose wife left him, he's a beet farmer, we want to take him to kill the dragon with us, or to slay the dragon with us. And it's like, okay, great. Like, let me come up with the backstory for him. Let me figure all this stuff out. And I was like, you know, he's a civilian, right? And they're like, yeah, we're going to put him in plate armor. I'm like, he has a strength score of 8. He can't even wear plate armor, you know? So like, that's a lot of it. But in Barovia, in that setting with Curse of Strahd, it leaves a little bit less to chance. But man, my players, at least starting out with a new group, it's difficult to read where they're going to go and how they're going to improvise. And you know, you just have to be flexible as a DM. I feel like is the main key point.
As a DM, do you guys find yourselves constantly having to like do those long drawn out narratives like on the fly, like when someone makes that decision, or for the most part have you thought out as many avenues as you can?
I think it's different for each dungeon master.
I think so, yeah.
Like, how do you approach it, Austin?
So I use the Matt Mercer concept, you know, from Critical Role. It's sick. So you envision a person, right? You start small. Then where does that person live in the town? What do they do in the town? Like, who do they know? Like, what are their relationships? Then you envision the town. Like, what is this town's main export? Like, what are they doing? What do they need done by the adventurers? And then you build that basically to a country level, right? So that's what I start with. Otherwise, then, just having the pre-written sort of backstories, but making them flexible so you can choose like which NPC is going to have this backstory. So if they don't choose this NPC that's, dark and edgy and foreboding in a tavern, he's not going to have the same backstory that the gnome merchant is going to have. It's different depending on. But that's sort of what I start with. But how do you do it, Greg?
I have a tendency to maybe like make a bullet list of high points. And then when we're talking about building characters, I will perhaps think ahead of time about roughly where they're going and roughly what sort of things they might run into, and I will come up with something, right? Just kind of loosely plan it out. I don't plan anything out with a lot of detail anymore, because what winds up happening is you either forget it or they go the wrong direction, or, if you keep it loose, it's easier to adapt to what your players are doing.
100%.
But then sometimes I will just invent something on the spot because I'm like, I did not expect them to go this way. I was running the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and they went into a swamp, and they needed to get across the swamp, so I just invented a little anthropomorphic 3-foot-tall alligator dude named Anton.
I want to meet Anton.
Cajun.
I want to meet Anton.
It was so much fun. I was making up stuff on the fly, and he's like, "Y'all hungry? I'll fix you some lunch." Yeah. And they go, "Yeah, sure." And he goes, "Oh, how? Help me get these kingfish out the water." And he pulls this trap out of the water, and it's got crayfish, but they all have little crowns. And he's like dumping them into a pot, and they're going, "Oh, my throne! Oh, father! You're not my son!" And he knocks the other one into the pot, and it's just dumb Hamlet references, things like that from the crayfish that are being boiled.
Yeah, no, that's so sick. That is like the ideal Dungeons and Dragons scene, and that's something that's going to your players will remember until the end of it. Or, my players would so they would let Anton get across the swamp with them, and then they would try to recruit him. They'd be like, "Bro, you need to come fight with us. Can you do anything?" And Anton would be like, "No, I just boil crawfish," or "No, I can just traverse the swamp." And they're like, "That's enough. Like, we got you." Is how my players would go about that, and it's tough.
That's a smart way to do it, though, right?
It is. But man, do they get Brady Bunch kind of team at the end of it. And like I had one character that was a half orc, and he just continued to want to be something else. Like, so they found a Yeti encapsulated in ice, and he was like, "Bro, let me get one of the arms of that guy and put it on my arm," because he previously what had happened was there was a bard, and he was trying to support him, so he cast heat metal on his axe, and he rolled a natural 1, and then when a natural 1 happens in my game, it's like anything could happen, right? Same thing with a nat 20. Like
I love making that so swingy.
It is chaos if any of those things happen, but man, is it going to be good or bad chaos depending on what you roll. And so he accidentally chops his own arm off because the axe cauterizes it because it's heated. And so he rolls a nat 1. He swings it wildly with one arm because he was trying to do a strength check with one arm. He succeeds the strength check, but he fails the attack roll, and he chops his own arm off. And then he cauterizes it so it can't get reattached. It can't be fixed by the druid. Like, he's got one less limb. So then they go to a shop, and he's got an elder druid there, and they're like, "Hey, like, let's bribe the druid. Like, if we give him all of our gold," and then this druid had like a fixation with nuts, and they were like, "And we give him all these tree nuts that we gathered." Well, he put the arm on, and I'm like, "Roll persuasion," and they're like, "Nat 20," and I'm like, "Crap, okay." The druid's gonna try, it's a level 20 druid, blah 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 this, blah blah that, and I, put myself in that situation by explaining this stuff to my players and having this stuff written out, and then he gets a Yeti arm at the end of it, and the Yeti arm, had a mind of its own to begin with, sort of like that movie where your hand keeps trying to kill you.
Was it Idle Hands? Is that it? Yeah. I don't know why I remember that.
Yeah, and then from like leveling up with the arm and getting more stuff, like he starts to get this half orc starts to get like white fur like mixed in. You could see the Yeti like composition actually changing, and it's just, you know, and then he gains the ability chilling gaze, which makes, you know, which any Yeti can like stare at somebody and make them paralyzed. It was so interesting. And then he was like, I want to lose a leg next, and I'm like, bro, you're good, man. You don't need to be half orc, half this, half that.
Now he's just trying to push his limits. He's like, what can I lose and add on?
Yeah.
Honestly, that sounds like how I would do it, really. Like, if you're going to give me the option to hodgepodge myself back together into something cooler, I'm probably going to do it.
He was like a Frankenstein. He had like a different leg, he had a different arm.
One leg's like substantially larger than the others. He's just 100%. Waddling in.
Yeah, he had a goat man's leg, or a Brayman was the homeschool like monster.
Yeah, that's like the beast folk from Curse of Strahd around the Abbey. But I would let them. I don't know. I might let them keep doing it, but if you change too much, you might start losing some advantages from some of the other stuff, and I don't know. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he was susceptible to fire. Unfortunately, after taking the Yeti arm, after he gained like control over it, and that sort of moved the players to not be fireballing him, because he was a barbarian. He would always run in, right? And fireball, like friendly fire, is always available in D&D. Like if you're in the radius, fireball is a 20-foot spear, man. Like you're rolling dexterity like all the enemies. And this guy is.
I have a fireball bugaboo. I have a little thing. Okay, so you see people online saying, "Oh, the wizard casts fireball," but your friends are in the room. I didn't ask how big the room is. I said I cast fireball. Yeah. If you take at I believe it's 3rd level the evocation school as a wizard, you get the ability spell sculpt, which lets you pick your targets. So like unless you deliberately build your wizard to be a schmuck, then you should be able to keep from hitting your friends, unless you want to, which that's cool. You know, that is all you. It's just, I keep hearing it phrased like, well, I couldn't help it.
A lot of people are, in my campaign, move to sorcerer more because, I mean, wizards, they have to know their knowledge and everything like that, whereas sorcerers are, you know, sort of gifted it. But, you know, the meta magic and all that stuff really helps, except if they're like twin spelling a fireball, in which case, you know, you're getting hit with 2 fireballs instead of 1. And yeah, I mean, it's like the D&D party's like duct tape is what I consider fireball at 3rd level. Like, you know, that once they hit level 5, like it's fireball galore. It's like a buffet, unfortunately, like, in some parties.
Is it twin spell fireballs? Am I remembering right? That's going to be like 16d6?
Yeah, it's 8d6 per fireball. Yeah.
That is a lot of dice to roll.
100%. And it gets even worse, like in the higher levels, because when you upcast it, you get more dice. Yeah.
I won't lie though, it's satisfying to roll.
I mean, it sounds so
dice.
satisfying. Like just hearing them all clank. Like I need that in my life.
There's a game system called Hero System that uses d6s. It's been around since the early '80s, and I have friends who, when they were in high school, because we didn't grow up together, we met when I was older. They lived in a town with a college, and they went to the student union, because that was the only place with enough space to roll the dice. And they literally had like a 5-gallon bucket of D6s. Because if you've ever played Champions, you're like nodding along going, because that's, Champions is a superhero setting for Hero System, and you can literally roll a bucket of D6s for damage. Is it necessary?
It's not about what's necessary. It's really about what makes you happy these days, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And some of my party members enjoy, you know, using a fireball. I mean, if they're a rogue and they have, I forget what it's called, if they have the ability to, where instead, I think it's evasive footwork or maybe evasion, is where if they were to get hit with an AoE spell, they can choose instead, if they make the save, to not take any damage. So that's a piece. But then here recently, my party that I've been doing the longest campaign with here recently, the druid will just turn into a fire elemental, and he's the tank. So he'll just turn into a fire elemental, and he'll, you know, be immune to fire damage. Yeah. I did introduce a magical item, though, that sort of limits that, because they're in an Arctic setting right now. Basically, the cloak will heat you and like save your life, and it will sustain you in cold settings, but it takes fireballs to recharge. So if it hits this bard before it hits any of the enemies, or if it even gets close to this bard's cloak, the fireball just gets vacuumed into it, and he gets a whole day's worth of heat. So and this bard is really good at playing himself. Like he's really good at separating himself from the character and playing the character the way that he sees the character to be played. So he didn't tell any of the party that he has this until they launched 3 fireballs, and they're like, "Where'd they go?" And he's like, "Man, I'm getting a little warm," So,
I think hearing like all the intricacies of the different roles and nuances of them, like from an outsider's perspective, it doesn't seem like it's that in depth, but like, what do you think is probably like the biggest learning curve to kind of get over that and get like more into your role within the game?
The biggest problem I've seen with most of the players I've had. So, like I said earlier, I'm a little older, right? The people that I tend to play with have a problem loosening up and actually role-playing. They tend to treat it like more of a tactical game.
That's
fine.
kind of how I would view it from an outsider's perspective. Is it's like
it's
more of a tactical game if you're not committing to your character.
It's not wrong to play that way, right? That's the nice thing about it, is you can play with your friends at your table the way you want to and the way that everybody's comfortable. The conflict is that I am more of a method actor player, right? I like developing characters, and like Anton, there is absolutely no reason to go that hard with just a little throwaway character, right? But like, I do, as often as possible, because it is so fun.
I think that like the people within your group would resonate with that better though, because they're going to see that you took the time to add all those little details, which makes it more fun for them.
But not everybody is able to think on their feet quickly, and not everybody's comfortable with trying to, because that's another thing, is you have to be willing to do it and look kind of goofy and maybe have it not work until you get better at it. Like I saw an interview with Penn Jillette once where he's talking about anything you learn to do, anything. When you start, you will, his words, suck. You have to be comfortable sucking at it until you don't, right? And he's right, and that's everything. And if you're playing a game around a table with your friends, even though being with your friends is going to be a lower barrier. Like, they're not necessarily going to mock you as much, depending on your friend group.
Yeah, it depends on the friends, I guess.
Yeah. Not everybody's going to be able to feel comfortable with that. And also, not everybody derives enjoyment from it.
I think that, the big thing is, like, I do accents with all my characters. Like, I have a Dwarvish accent, like, I've got an Elvish accent, like, I've done all this stuff, and I've curated from, all the stuff that I do. And beginning with, like, before you know everybody, you don't know how hard they're going to go into it. You don't know how hard they're going to role play and stuff. But I think it's the DM's role to really, like, set the tone for the adventure. Like, if you're going to min-max your characters and you guys are going to, try to roll the most dice possible and do the biggest damage, that's absolutely fine. And that's what some of my players do. But I have this one player that wants to talk his way out of every situation. And I have this other player that she's like, she just wants to focus on her story. But everything else, if it leads back to her, then she's interested in it. But, I think the other big thing is, like, separating yourself from the character, because metagaming and stuff that's being talked about around the table is one thing, and being able to filter that information so that you're not already playing with that disposition of how I'm going to use this information that I know but my character doesn't, right? I think that's a tough part as well.
Like, your character doesn't understand that everything is based on rolling dice and that there's a probability involved, so they're not doing math in their head about whether or not this is a good idea,
But some characters that have been around a while will have a good battle sense, and they'll be like, oh, that guy's wearing plate armor. I probably can't hit him unless if I, like, really try, Like, that kind of stuff is okay, I feel like. But
with everything, there are limits. You can't just say that you can't use any out-of-character knowledge, because it gets squishy at the edges, right?
100%. And I think leading into the character backstory, like, that's why it's so important to have that. Because if your character backstory, like, if you're a ranger and your favorite enemy is, like, undead, would you know about vampires? Because they're a part of the undead. I think it's I usually impose roles on my players, like at that point, like talk about, like roll history, roll religion, roll these things to find out if your character would know, or if you're able to pull that memory from the back of your mind that you read that one time, you know.
So if you have a specialized knowledge, like if you have proficiency with history or something, then the knowledge you pull up is going to be more detailed and more useful. But you know, if you roll high enough and you don't have proficiency, you will pull up something at least vague, unless you're talking about something that no one's run into before, right? Like some weird subvariant of a Duergar or something, and everybody's from the surface and has never been underground. That reminds me, though, I do have a question. Lots of people have been discussing different options for character, you know, racial accents online. And one of the funnier ones I've heard in the last few years is the idea that dwarves all sound Australian because they come from a land down under, right? The typical dwarven accent is Scottish. What direction do you run with?
I do a mix of both. I would say it's got some Australian accent, and it's got some, you know, some Scottish as well, is what I usually do. And it's absolutely funny, and it's my go-to. Like every innkeeper or 9 out of 10 innkeepers that I just imagine them as an innkeeper. You know, they're going to be shining the glass on the other side of the bar. They're going to be talking about the drink specials they have. They're going to talk about, you know, the beer and the steins that they're giving, and those things is like really my dwarvish thing. They did interact with a dwarf in this ice sort of area that they're in that was a Yeti like master. So he had like 10 different Yetis that like reported them, and he was able to tame them and all this other stuff. And the druid turned into a Yeti because he got a book of monstrosities that let him wild shape into Yeti. So he turned into a Yeti and was like, "Hey, is everything cool with you guys?" And they're like, "Yeah, he gives us free food. Like, why wouldn't we be okay with this?" You know? And
sweet deal, man.
Yeah. So, you know, it's interesting in that regard. But yeah, I think I want to say too, the beginning part of it is like if they're from the Underdark, or like even the gnomes, right? Like the Underdark is like a space where it is down under, where, you know, you could lead that to an Australian accent. Whereas if they're from the above ground, they might talk more Scottish, you know. And
that's a good way of looking at it. So like how long do you guys' campaigns typically last? Like have you been running the same one for like years, or do you have kind of a shelf life on them?
So my campaigns usually run as long as the players are interested in it. So this most recent one I've been going for about 6 years, which is, you know, we meet once a week, sometimes not. Because, I mean, sometimes plans don't line up, but we usually all commit to one day, whether that be Tuesday, Sunday, or Friday is usually our days, and we, you know, go into that. And then if I'm in person, we love doing in-person D&D, but right now we do it mostly online.
Have you found like doing the D&D online to be difficult, or have you guys kind of just adapted to it over time since COVID?
I think I use Discord mostly for my campaigns, because, I mean, you can have your webcam open. You can use, there's a different array of tools that you can use. Like D&D Beyond is a good tool for, you know, having your character stuff in there and having all the information in there if you have the repertoire of the books in there. Roll20 is a good tool. Foundry is an okay tool as well. But yeah, I mean, we usually do just a mix of Discord plus like actual dice and character sheets is what most of my players do, and then some of them will have the D&D Beyond subscription.
So are you running theater of the mind, where everything is just, you know, you're discussing it and everybody's holding kind of the picture of what's happening in their head, or do you use a battle map of some sort?
So I use a battle map for most of like the big encounters. So where the chapter's ending, like in the book, like, so if they're fighting a big bad that I've been leading up to for multiple sessions, I have the skinny minis. I don't know if you're familiar with those. They're the 2D printed acrylic figurines, or the 2D printed like acrylic standing miniatures, and those are the ones I use right now. But I did have a collection of miniatures that I painted beforehand as well. So I'll usually have a second webcam like pointing to a different table of the battle map, and we'll be going over it while I have the wireless headphones on.
That's pretty interesting. I use Roll20 personally, but that's just, I've been using it for a while now, so I'm comfortable with it. So
yeah, I used Roll20 for a couple years, and mostly in my previous campaign, but And then two of my players are artists, like outside. They're like, what they actually do. One's a tattoo artist and one's just a regular artist. So they've been able to make like some custom tokens for us in Roll20, which is kind of sick. And they sometimes will even draw like amazing like scenes of like natural ones or natural 20s. It's like the best thing about it too, like bringing it to life.
Yeah, it's always fun to see what happens with a crit either way.
Yeah. Critical fail or critical success. Yeah, you're right. How long do your campaigns usually go though, Rick?
It varies quite a bit. I've had some TPKs in the last few years, but I've also completed a few. Like I completed Strahd with 2 different groups.
Awesome.
We kind of finished Rime of the Frost Maiden. I feel like that one's a little disjointed, so I went ahead and cut it off after they deal with Oral. And I'm probably going to save some of the later parts of that and reuse it in something sometime. But then I've had like Tomb of Annihilation. My group did not make it to the end. They ran across a beholder, and it was rude. So I think the longest I've run is maybe 5 years, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
With same group the whole time?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, kind of, in the sense that
sometimes you have players switch in and out, sort of like musical chairs, because one player, like I know in
Ship of Theseus.
One player of mine had like twins, so he had to go away for a couple months. So we were like, hey, do you want to play instead? Like this other person we knew that was into D&D. So he didn't step into his place, but we added a new character and we lost another character.
So what winds up happening is it's the sort of thing where you start with a group of 5 people, and some people leave, some people join, and if it goes on long enough and that happens often enough, at the end you're like, is it the same group, yes or no? Because it's mostly new people, but it's got a continuity to it. So it's like have you seen the movie John Dies at the End?
I vaguely remember it, yeah.
Okay. It's one of my wife's favorite movies, so I've seen it a lot. And the whole Ship of Theseus thing is the opening sequence is about that. Okay. But it's from a horror movie angle. Much more grisly than just a ship having pieces replaced.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the critical hits and critical misses can lead to some really funny things happening. Any of those that you really remember pretty well, or that stick out? Or
one of my most recent games, I would say it was a couple, maybe it was a year or two ago, where we were running Curse of Strahd, and I want to say the rogue sneaks into Strahd's mansion. So he rolls a natural success, a natural 20 to get into Castle Ravenloft. And he's sort of digging around in stuff that he definitely shouldn't be. And Strahd sort of has a really good grasp of his domain and his lair. So like Strahd immediately sees that he's there. Even though he rolls like a nat 20 on stealth, Strahd, his perception is going to be higher than what the player could attribute to, right? So maybe the compatriots or the butler and, the staff of Castle Ravenloft couldn't know that they were there, but Strahd did. So the guy goes into the kitchen and starts stealing cutlery. He was just like, I'm going to try to find the dungeon. I was like, okay, well, roll a 20. Let's see. And he rolled like a 5 to find where he was going or to know where he was going. Because, this is an unfamiliar environment. He didn't have blueprints walking in. So he goes into the kitchen. And I'm like, yeah, so you see some like... it's not silver cutlery, because why would it be that? He's a vampire. Why would he have silver cutlery? But you see gold encrusted cutlery. And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, how much do I think this would sell for? And I'm like, probably 20 gold for the set. And he's like, I'm going to take it all out and dump it in my bag. And I'm like, okay, great. And I'm like, can you roll to do that stealthily? Rolls a natural 1. Like the whole entire castle sees this dude sneak into there, this final boss area, and he's stealing silverware or goldware, not even silverware. Yeah. And it comes into, one of those like Dukes of Hazzards, like, sort of outros where he's running away from everybody, like sort of chasing him throughout the castle. And then he rolls a dexterity check because Strahd can pace through the walls and Ravenloft and stuff. And I rolled, to see what Strahd would do. And he just trips him at the end, and falls face first on his face and knocks out. And he rolls another natural 1. after he falls and breaks like 4 of his teeth, and he loses like a point off of his charisma because of how bad.
Wait, charisma is taken into consideration in
It
this?
is a score. It is one of your the things that describes your character. Yeah.
Hey now, let's go.
But yeah, so that was probably the most recent one. The other ones I've already described, about the Yeti arm. He was a natural 1 to cut his own arm off, and then a natural 20 to attach a Yeti arm. And so that will forever stick with me as a DM because that's just too wild. I don't think I'll ever have a situation like that again, but then some of my players do try to one-up each other.
I think we might need a artist rendition from Greg, possibly a quick little doodle on how we think this man would have looked with 4 different limbs and a completely different torso and head. That's going to be the teaser for this episode.
That reminds me of the head of Vecna story.
Yeah.
Which that is amazing. That is inspired and devious. I approve so wholeheartedly. I feel like it's the sort of thing that if I tried that with my players, they would be like, nah, you're being too calm and you're just giving this to us and we don't trust it.
I guess there probably are some trust issues with you in the groups, huh?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the player's job to not take what the DM says at face value sometimes, But when we usually ask, are you sure, is usually like a dead giveaway, like, you probably shouldn't do this. But, and then I would say the other natural 20 that really made it in my current campaign is I built this one boss. They were in the Sky Island, like everything had wings, like it took some sort of Treasure Planet aspects from that film, and it was so interesting. And there was this boss, and he had just so many tattoos on him, and he was like such a sick boss. I was so excited to fight my players with them, and they end up recruiting him. And I'm like, crap, now I have to play this guy with all these abilities that I made all throughout the campaign just because they were like, hey, like, you're kind of cool. Like, we don't want to fight you. We want you to be a part of us. And he's like, well, what can you give me? And they're like, how about all our gold and 3 magical items? And he's like, what? And that's like the players parted ways with everything just to get this super boss that literally carried them through like 2 or 3 legs of the campaign, and I had to scale every single difficulty level up just because the dude was like, man, you're cool. I like you. I want you to come with us. And the guy was like, he rolled so well against his persuasion. He was like, I don't have anything better to do. I was going to kill you guys, but okay, you guys seem cool now too, I guess.
I was running the box campaign, the Fandelver campaign, and I had a rogue character do that with Clarg, the bugbear that's in the campaign. And so he winds up joining him because he's a bugbear. No one's ever been nice to him. He's like this.
That's true. I didn't think
goblinoid.
about it from that perspective. Like, these characters also want friends. And so that is an approach to take. It doesn't always have to be violence.
No, it doesn't. And sometimes it's way better not to go that route. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The rogue that befriended him was this little halfling. You've got Clarg running around with this halfling on his shoulders, like crossbowing people from his back. It was ridiculous.
That's what makes the campaign, though. And then I had to stop my players though, because by the third leg of the campaign, they had like 3 friends, and I was like, guys, like, you can't have 10 players and 3 friends. Like, I have to start giving you dragons to fight against if you want to keep playing this way. And I'm like, so I made this pivotal part where like each one of them had like this other thing to do, and they were like, I can put off my personal stuff to continue helping you guys, but these other 2 have to go then, and you sort of have to make a dynamic where they don't all want to work together. Yeah, it's tough.
Well, because otherwise it can get out of hand, and it just, I mean, maybe that's a direction you want to go, where your party just turns into a bunch of warlords rampaging across the countryside.
And then you got to think of the DM's perspective too, right? So if they have 3 allies and then they're fighting 12 enemies, you have to now role play 15 of these characters. Of the 25, you get 15, and they're talking to each other. Like, you can't. They don't have ESP, and I always joke in my game it's like ESPN, but they don't have that. So like, I'm talking to myself. Like, if you take some of my conversations in D&D out of context, they would be like, this guy is crazy.
Yeah. You've got serious problems, sir. And
Yeah.
I know, but not the way you think. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up for the week. Austin, thank you so much for coming by. Always good to talk with a fellow player, dungeon master, compare notes.
No worries. It's the least I can do. Thanks for having me once again. Now, I'm super excited that me and Greg got to finally talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and it's sick. I would love to play in one of your campaigns, Greg. And if you want to do a guest star, I think the some of the underrated roles is sometimes I'll have somebody come in as an NPC, just a one shot, and I think that adds another level of intricacy to the DM, like the whole campaign. Also, I think that's like a supporting role or a cameo.
That can always be fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, folks, for coming by. That's another episode of Concept Pending in the Can. Heroes and Villains. We'll see you next time.